can't hear.
Have almost like a dogma that we use the old equipment that we used in the 90s, like the Atari computer, the 909 drum machine, you know, and very old school like 90s samplers, which have not a lot of memory, but they have a certain type of sound. So we use that technology, but of course I think the stuff that we do sounds a little different. I mean, we brought out different sides on Atari Teenage Riot on this album particularly, but it's maybe more a little bit more techno rather than jungle. Like, goes back to the very early days of Atari Teenage Riot. This has a lot of the energy of the early days of Atari Teenage Riot, but of course it sounds a little bit more powerful now, I think, because our knowledge has also advanced, you know. So it's like, it's not just a retro thing. We try to transport that into the future, but we want to keep the DNA of Atari Teenage Riot the same. I think Atari Teenage Riot has really found its sound over the years. You know, every record sounds a bit different, and it progresses in a different way. So it's not just a repetition of the old stuff. But then on the other side, we don't want to just sound like other bands. So it's a bit like walking that fine line, you know. We see now the results and the consequences of politics. For example, in the 90s, the big discussion and debate was often globalization, for example. Yeah. And people were like, what are you talking about? Why are you so pessimistic? We said, you know, there are good and bad sides to it, but you have to understand the bad sides. And we warned about a lot of things in our songs. And now I think many people understand more what we were talking about, because something that happens on the other side of the world, suddenly you might lose your job or something. You know, it's not like it used to be 20 years ago, where, you know, you could very easily say, I vote this politician, then maybe this happens. You know, now it's so complicated. We think that's necessarily a negative thing. We just have to be very aware of that. And I think it's a sort of time where we have to use the internet, for example, to really connect on a global level and get a lot more information. You know, and I think it's very important that everybody understands this, that we have to, you know, let's just don't waste time with bullshit. It's really, you know, get information so we can make the right decisions about our own lives. You know, I mean, for example, WikiLeaks, all these organizations, they try to really give people more info, what's really happening in Afghanistan, Iraq, all these countries, so we can say, as citizens, okay, like, maybe we don't agree with our government. We have to really change, because it's our money, it's our tax money. You know, these people live of our money. You know, this is the money that we all pay. So we have to know what's going on. And I think this is very different now than in the 90s. I think in the 90s it was more like a resistance towards the authorities. I think now we have a lot more power in terms of gathering information and spreading that, so people then can make action. If you see the Occupy Wall Street protests or the student protests that started, you know, really to become more heavy since 2010, something like that. You see activists online, you know, you have on one side people in the streets really going out there and showing, you know, the numbers, you know, it's good for the media and stuff, but then you have all the stuff that goes on online. These two things really help each other, while I think in the 90s the whole internet thing was kind of missing, so, you know, it was very difficult to gather information. First of all, it was very surprising how Berlusconi stayed in power so long. I think for many people around the world, you know, it was a bit like, seems to be so obvious that it's a corrupt person. What we're seeing is not only a problem that Italy has, you know, like I think it's in many countries. It's politicians just being corrupt, and they don't act in the interest of people, of the population who elect them, who vote for them. They do it in the interest of the multinational corporations, or the banks or something. So I think it's becoming a bigger problem. Like the longer this goes on, because problems that we need to solve are not solved, and you see it in then it's becoming more negative. And I think at some point we escalate until something really changes, because we can't afford to just go on like that. So in a way, people sometimes look at just a politician and go, he's good or he's bad. But I think it's more a system that's being put in place. They act in other people's interests, but not in the interest of the majority of the people. So the democracy that we have becomes almost like a joke. We warned about this in the 90s, and we always said it becomes something like a fake democracy. And we were talking a lot about Germany at the time, but I think now what goes for Germany also goes for many other European countries and America anyway. So it's a dangerous time. All the protests, I think they are important. Sometimes it seems like it's hopeless, it doesn't change anything, but showing the numbers, this actually does something. Like people in power are scared of the population like getting together and waking up, because we are more people. And by dividing everybody, it's almost, this is the one really powerful tool they have, that if people can't agree on basic ideas, it keeps everything split up and it's just less power. I think there's also something else. If you don't know, and you're really in a situation where you can't even trust the information anymore, because it's very maybe censorship or stuff like this, just don't consume anything. Because I think that the moment when people stop buying stuff, the whole system crashes. It's the same with the banks. I like these ideas when people are like, okay, let's get all the cash out of our bank accounts on one day, because it would just collapse. It's very powerful. Like sometimes to not do anything it's a destructive force, but it can be sometimes a very good solution, because those in power, they are just using everybody and the money we make, our workforce. It's like a little bit almost like parasites. So once we deny that, it's collapsing. I really think it's a dangerous game these people are playing, because it's a very destructive dynamic that is in place. Since a few years, it got much worse, I think. I remember when the Iraq war started, there was a lot of debates about how this is going to be financed. And I remember many people were saying, America always does this. Like Wall Street and the financial institutions, they work almost like a black hole. They will suck money into it and from Europe, from other parts of the world, until they were able to finance it. And I think it's almost since the financial crisis started, this really feels like it. I don't believe that it's all a conspiracy or something. I think it's just that the way the system is built, it doesn't logically make sense. Sooner or later, if the profits are just being made by a minority of people, and it doesn't go back into the society somehow, maybe hundreds of years ago you would say a rich person would start more companies or would employ more people to make more money or whatever, or buy more things. Now I think this is not even happening. So it itself, I think capitalism, we have to really question it the way it is now, especially in connection with the kind of politics we have, where politicians almost seem to distort the picture. For example, if you look at the situation with the banks, sometimes people hate me for my opinion, but I think that the problem was, in fact, politicians trying to regulate that stuff, because otherwise people would not even trust the banks. If there's a store in your street, a local, a little store, the guy sells poisoned food, nobody would ever go to the store again. But if the government would say, actually, this food is good again, people, and so I think politicians really disguise a lot of things and make it worse. The system is so tight almost that any politician will get into this power, and that's also a good thing sometimes. That not one person could just change everything like that, But on the other side, I think it's so slow, and of course you have to ask yourself, again, what did he use to get elected? The kind of rhetoric. It sounded very fresh compared to George Bush, and it was very necessary that George Bush just goes. I think everybody agrees with that. But then it feels almost trapped right away, and I don't know. I think we will see more in the future where you go, okay, did Obama know that before when he went in, or was it really that he ended up just making one compromise after another? Because it's actually not that easy to change that. So far, it's very sad that in many important things he has failed so far. Just Guantanamo Bay, for example. I think this is such an important symbol also for American politics to the outside world. If this is still going, there's no reason to justify that, in my opinion. Or they have to really communicate more info. Why? Because to me, this doesn't seem to make any sense. This is something we know from Nazi Germany or the Eastern Socialist Germany, these kind of prisons that seem to be outside of a law. I don't understand why he can't just close it down. There's a lot of acting, of course, going on in politics, which is also so dangerous. And a lot of politicians say what people want to hear, and then they don't act in this way. So I can't really decide. I personally, I don't vote because I'm an anarchist. So I think we should get rid of the state, the nation state altogether.
Bye. Bye. See you later.